Hi, this is Joe Chambers. Thanks for watching Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. Actually, this week is kind of a blend between Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage and Musicians Hall of Fame The Vault Series. The reason being, it was shot on location in Los Angeles a few weeks ago in our hotel room with a very talented bass guitarist, and when he's not playing bass, he's playing guitar for the one and only Paul McCartney, Brian Ray. Brian also spent almost 2 decades performing and being the band leader with Etta James. When we come back, Brian Ray. Welcome back to Musicians Hall of Fame with Brian Ray. Brian, thank you so much for doing this, especially so quickly here and while we're in LA. And
it's a pleasure to be here, Joe. Thanks for asking me, really, yeah.
Like what most people want to know, and we're just going to act like nobody knows, how'd you get started and what made you want to get started in music?
I was born in '55, and that was sort of the year, coincidentally, that rock and roll hit the mainstream. And I had an older sister, 15 years my elder, who was in love with this guy, Elvis Presley, and Little Richard, and the Everly Brothers, and Rick Nelson, and Chuck Berry. There was something that happened. It was not just the music, it was the whole thing. There was a sense of excitement and danger, and that it was a younger generation's music. I put together the fact that the ladies loved them and all these new artists that had just come out. And I think that just resonated with me. I just said to myself, I want to be a part of this. Inside, at 3 years old, that I knew. I didn't know till later that I could actually do that or that I would actually do that, but I know I wanted to. That was the most exciting thing I could think of. So
what was your first introduction to a guitar or whatever instrument you started with?
Well, so I gravitated towards guitar, but I had my little time with every instrument in a rock and roll band. I was fascinated with electric keyboards for a while, with not so much bass, but that came later, with drums, with lead singing. I wanted all of it. I wanted to do all of it. So I got to touch on all of it as a kid. But with the guitar, I think the Elvis and the Bill Haley records and the Chuck Berry records put guitar solos as a part of their records and featured them in such a way that it just seemed fun to me. I want to do that. And, hearing, Scotty Moore solo on Heartbreak Hotel or Jailhouse Rock, just incredible guitar playing. And it was very evocative of an exciting life to me. So anyway, I think that started it for me. But also, my sister Jean, who turned me on to all these artists, was herself a guitar player. And she was soon to be married to a guy who was a folk artist who grew up with Phil Oakes. And they formed a duo after singing in the New Christy Minstrels, a big sort of folk ensemble. And they split off and did their own thing, and they got a great deal with Phillips and then with Verve Folkways, I believe, and they were called Jim and Jean. And they did some great records. I think there's 4 records in all. One is a compilation record. And I was in love with that music, in love with my sister and her husband, Jim and Jean, and into now rockabilly and now hot rod music, and now, doo-wop and rhythm and blues. And, I went through all the great stuff like anyone our age would.
What was your main instrument at that time? Was it bass or was it guitar or both? Or?
Well, I hadn't really started playing yet. And it wasn't until the British invasion started that I started to think, well, wait, these are guys that aren't that much older than me, and they're doing it together, and it's not like a produced thing. It's like bands. This is the Beatles, it's the Stones, the Who, the Animals. They're all young lads, and that exactly this day, that many years ago in 1964, the Beatles made their debut on Ed Sullivan's show, February 9th.
Mm-hmm.
And I was there on the floor and saw this sort of tidal wave of joy and enthusiasm and talent coming at me. Now, I'd heard their songs on the radio, and I may have even bought a single, but to see them live on television was a whole nother thing, and it really lit me up. And I think that it was soon after that that I started really bearing down on it and learning some guitar. And I learned, I think Gloria might have been the first song that I learned on an acoustic guitar.
What was your first gig in front of an audience?
I think it was with my sister Jean. She and her husband Jim had separated. It was about 1969, and she was now getting her solo career going. And she invited me to come play with her at the Los Angeles Troubadour.
What was your first guitar?
Well, my first guitar that was my own was a $5 guitar from Tijuana, Mexico, that my sister Jean bought me from over the border. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I started crying.
Well, what was your first, real, Fender-ish or...
My first good electric guitar was a Fender Telecaster, and that got stolen. Soon after, I got a 1968 gold top Les Paul with P90s, the first reissued Gibson Les Paul. And
that's still have that?
I don't have that. I wanted to trade it for something else eventually. Just that spirit has always been a part of me. Like, you get into a guitar, you get really into that guitar, then you start getting into another guitar. And back when you're a kid, the thought of having two of them is unthinkable.
Right.
Yeah. Now it's a different story. I have more than two, but so that guitar I traded and got a 345, a Gibson 345. Soon after that, I bought my first vintage Les Paul. It was 1973. My sister's then boyfriend, Chris, had bought this gold top Les Paul with humbuckings, a 57, first year of humbuckings. And I treasured that thing. And that cost me a wild $850. And I was outraged. That was just a lot to spend. But he assured me it would go up in value, and it did. And I still do have that, to answer your question, because I know you were going to ask me. Mm-hmm. That's sort of my favorite guitar, my main guitar, and it's the guitar that I did my first audition with Etta James on, and that led to 15 years as her musical director and band leader. And every show I played with her was on that guitar.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did that progress? How did you meet Etta?
Before Etta, I was working with Bobby Boris Pickett playing the Monster Mash. Mm-hmm. That was my first actual real professional gig, my first tour. And my sister Jean happened to be a backup singer in that band, so that was nice. And most of my high school band was the band for it. And it was, of course, a holiday kind of a thing. Every year he sells another 200,000 albums, But there we were playing at we had been hired to play a fundraiser for this strange cowboy renegade guy who had just gotten some trouble with the law for grand theft. And he was trying to raise money for his, fines. And so he put on a concert in his backyard out in the valley. And there was a guy named Phil Kaufman who had just lost his friend, Graham Parsons. And that's the reason he was in trouble with the law, was, the way that went down. And he was grieving and sad, and now he had to pay this fine for grand theft for the coffin. Anyway, so I didn't know all that before I said yes, but there we were wearing ghoul makeup, like zombie makeup, in a backyard thing with Dr. Demento and the Modern Lovers and some other bands. And we were the Crypt Kicker 5 playing for Phil Kaufman right after that crazy caper he did. Phil one day said, I'm going to Etta's rehearsal tomorrow up in the Hollywood Hills, and I understand the guitar player can't make it. Could you come along? Do you want to sit in and see if there's something going on there? And I'm like 18 years old. I went, yeah, and we drove up to that house the next day. It was John Densmore's house from the Doors. And there she is, set up with her then killer band, really great players. And just this little skinny white-haired dude, from Glendale. And I sat down kind of sheepishly and plugged in and just did my thing and jammed along and kind of held my own. I felt like pretty good about it. And she said to Phil after, she says, I like that little white kid. And she came up and said, hey, could you come and play with me in Long Beach, California tomorrow night? I said, sure. And my eyes got all wide, and I went down with Phil and played that show, and that was the first of thousands, with Etta James over the next 15 years. Yeah.
That's fantastic, isn't it? So, first time I saw you was at Bridgestone in Nashville with, I guess, the person that inspired you to make a band was with Paul.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
It is. I mean, that's unbelievable, isn't it? That you saw that,
crazy,
and then you end up there in that same.
I mean, what can you say? It's a life of seconds and inches and chances and opportunities and missed opportunities and missed chances. And in this instance, with Paul, I was able to, be there when a phone call came in to do one song for the Super Bowl 2002 before the anthem, one song. And it was basically an audition to see if I would be the right guy for it with his producer, David Kahn. And David called me. He had gotten my number from Abe Laboriel Jr., with whom I'd just been touring all over France with Johnny Halliday and Mylène Farmer. And I had expressed to Abe, who now had just recorded with Paul, hey, I'd love to have a shot at that. When he said, yeah, we're looking for a guitar player who plays some bass. And I said, I'd love a shot at that. And Abe said, oh, that's cool. And he put my name forward to David Kahn. I went down to David's office, sat with him, talked with him, played a bass. Then I played his guitar, just talking, not even plugged in, just talking, chatting music, and he's watching my hands. And
Him
with just David Kahn alone.
Okay.
And at the end of the meeting, he said, well, this has been great, man. You seem like a cool guy, and Abe says you're great, and you look like you play well, and I'm going to put your name forward. There's other guys in line, but yeah, we'll see what happens. He put my name forward. That was a Monday. I got a call Tuesday to see if I could be on a plane Wednesday to go to New Orleans. And that's how fast it happened. Within a week of that call, I was back home.
How did Paul? I mean, Paul didn't hear you, or
Paul left it up to David Kahn.
That's trust, man.
That is some trust. Well, they'd just done an album together, and David had brought in that band, which was Abe and Rusty, and a guy named Gabe Dixon on keyboards. So I think he was fairly trusting of David Kahn's taste, and I'm very grateful to David Kahn.
How did you plugging in and playing bass in front of Paul McCartney? Were you cool? Were you freaked out? Were you nervous?
Yeah, of course you're freaked out. I mean, this is Paul McCartney. He reinvented bass for pop music. And so to me, Paul McCartney is sort of the most important bass player in rock and roll. Reinventing it and making it sort of more melodic and more counterpunctual and just incredible visionary, besides his writing skills and his singing skills and his arrangement and production skills. I mean, all of it. And then he looked cool too. So, I mean, he was sort of like, a mega god to anyone from my generation. And you'd be in that camp. So yeah, playing bass for him is a whole nother thing because bass is not my main instrument. Guitar is. But, I was just lucky enough to not screw it up that first day. And at the end of the first day of rehearsal, this is well after the Super Bowl. This is like 6 weeks later. I'd gone home and woodshedded a bunch because I was told now, we'll see you for rehearsals. I'm like, what? Paul said, yeah, stick with Abe and Rusty. They'll show you the ropes. See you in March. And I ran back to town, set up a little rehearsal studio, microphone, standing up, acoustic, 12-string, 6-string bass, and a stack of CDs. You remember CDs. And I just went through every Paul, Wings, and Beatles record that I could get my hands on and learned everything. I didn't have a set list. I had no idea what I was going to play on any of it. I didn't know if I was going to play guitar or bass on any given song, so I'd just learn everything I could. And I would pick out a couple vocal parts and just like, okay, I've got the idea of it, and after a week, I was like, oh man, this is too much. This is just a lot. Oh my God, And then the second week, I had Abe come over and, he kind of listened and he was all chill and happy and approving and gave me some confidence. And then, 3 weeks after that, after more work, I had my first day of rehearsal. And I remember sitting there playing bass and just said, don't look up. Just don't look up. And I just kept my nose down and did the work that was in front of me. And at the end of the first day of rehearsal, he said, okay, guys, sounds good. I'll see you tomorrow. And it wasn't until then that I felt like I could tell more people that I think I'm going on tour with Paul McCartney.
More with Brian Ray when we come back.
Hey Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum Backstage fans, check out our new Backstage gear. From t-shirts to coffee mugs, we've got you covered. Not yet a fan? Check out our YouTube channel and enjoy some intimate conversations with the world's best musicians. Dream Events and Catering is Nashville's leading full-service event and catering company. Grounded in exceptional customer service, creative expertise, and dreaming big, we imagine your next event as memorable, meaningful, and delicious. The Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum has been celebrating the men and women who make the music of our lives since 2006. The Musicians Hall of Fame is the one and only museum in the world that honors the musicians that played on the greatest recordings of all time.
It's a music city, huh? It's, where else are you going to get the cats, all the cats that are in this room?
From Hank to Hendrix, from LA to Nashville, the Musicians Hall of Fame will take you on a musical journey highlighting the talented musicians that created the soundtrack of our lives. Come see what you've heard, and while visiting, check out the interactive Grammy Museum Gallery at the Musicians Hall of Fame. Located in the heart of downtown Nashville in the first floor of the historic Nashville Municipal Auditorium. See you soon at the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum.
Welcome back to Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage with Brian Ray. So when we cut loose a minute ago, we were about to go to the first Paul McCartney tour. So what happened?
Well, so now we had just finished our 11 days of rehearsal. That's all we did before our first show in Oakland, California in 2002. It was April 15th, our very first show. And I was very, very nervous. And I remember we had a pinball machine backstage in our room, and I was like, bing, bang, bing, bang, bing, just anything to burn off some extra energy. Actually, I think it was April 1st. Yeah, I think it was April 1st. Anyway, a very exciting time for us, and I know the whole band was nervous, but Paul wasn't. And when we were about to walk to the stage, Paul came into the dressing room and said, okay, come on, guys, walk this way. And then he started, walking funny. And, that just put us all at ease. I mean, if he's so relaxed about it, this is going to go okay. He was not at all freaking out, And I thought we were on the verge of being ready. You know, we weren't definitely not over rehearsed. We were just about ready. And we went out and we did a show, and it was nearly 3 hours long, and it went very, very well. And we all went, whew, we all came back to the hotel and had a drink and a laugh and talked about it. And, you know, we were well on our way. You know, soon after that, we were in Madison Square Garden, and we were in Chicago. You know, we were doing the A markets right off the bat, and it was pretty damn fun, I must say.
How much bass, how much guitar were you doing? Were you just swapping back and forth? And when you're not playing bass, who's playing bass?
Well, if I'm not playing bass, he's playing bass.
So all the concerts, that's who's going to be doing it.
Yeah. I mean, there's one song at the end of the show where you see the three of us doing a guitar shootout at the end for that song called The End. You know, that jam that happens on Abbey Road. And people will often, like, you know, on social media say, wait a second, you're playing lead guitar on that. Who's playing bass? You know, and I said, Sir Wix Wickens plays bass for that section of the song. Like, I switch off. I start the Golden Slumbers on bass, and then I do a really quick switch with my tech. And at that point, Wix takes over on keyboard bass. Oh, little known fact.
Yeah.
You're the first to hear about it.
Good. You heard it first here. So, what did Paul say? Did he say anything at all after the concert?
The very first one, you
yeah,
mean?
Yeah.
He was, you know, he was happy. He doesn't say a whole lot. He didn't go like, you were great, and you. He's very chill, you know, and but you know when he's happy, and he was happy, so it's enough for us.
You know, he's always, I've never seen him lose it, you know, on any interview or anything.
No, he's got a great disposition. What are you going to say? I mean, you can imagine being Paul McCartney, you know, since birth, and being famous since you were like 15.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, that's a lot to sort of carry around, but I think that he is the best Paul McCartney in the world.
Yeah.
Yes, I will go on record as saying that.
There's only three people other than him have been in his shoes that, you know, and that's, I can't even imagine, like, I know I've seen him on before where he says, you know, you walk down the street and people start going crazy and grabbing their phones. I mean, that's got to be a little bit weird, you know.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. And given that it's true, like I said, he's pretty relaxed about it. Like, he lives in England, he lives in part-time in New York as well, and he'll walk down the street in New York with Nancy, his lovely wife, and, you know, he demands some sort of, you know, life outside of the bubble, you know, and he has one.
So where do you guys record at? Or is there one place? Or
a number of places. Yeah, a number of places. We've recorded in his studio out in England, in the south of England. We've recorded in Air Studios in England, at Abbey Road Studios several times.
How was that?
The Room. I mean, it's really something. You're sitting down there and you're looking up that stairwell that you've seen a million times in pictures to that window you've seen so many times in pictures. And it's a little bit of a buzz for sure.
Do they pull out the mics and all that you
Yeah,
use?
all the mics, all of the keyboards are still there. You know, he's got the upright piano that he played Lady Madonna on. That's the Mrs. Mills piano. Yeah, the old Steinway.
Which one of you guys does this is just for me, the lead riff on Maybe I'm Amazed?
That's Rusty on that one. I play bass on that song.
Y'all ever swap around parts?
No, not so much. Once you have an arrangement with Paul, it's going to stay that way. Okay. Oh, there's been a couple times when, you know, Paul's gone, well, why don't you try the solo on that one? And then I do, and then we change it. You know, well, things have changed a couple of times.
Do you ever get to play the old Hofner?
I have, but you see, he's a lefty, so I'm not going to get that far on it. But yeah, just to feel it, and, you know, just to kind of get that visceral buzz of holding that instrument that we saw on Ed Sullivan's show this day so many years ago. Yeah.
Now, the Texan, I think it was the Texan.
The Epiphone Texan
Yeah.
acoustic? Yeah.
That was right-handed though, wasn't it?
It was.
So did he switch it around, or did he just turn it upside down and play it reverse chord?
He plays it as a lefty, and but the bridge had to be reset at one point because the intonation, of course, the way for you guitar nerds out there, they had to switch the bridge.
Did he have that done when he wrote Yesterday and recorded Yesterday with it?
No, he played it for those many years with the intonation sort of opposite.
Which is not bad until you get higher up the neck, really. Anyway, too noticeable, do you think?
Yeah, well, that's debatable. But anyway, it certainly didn't matter on those songs, did it? Nobody cares.
No.
Because it's so well played and it sounds so great. He's got a very interesting sort of picking style. He does this thing with his thumb and his fingers. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever watched it. It's kind of like a flicking style. It's very interesting.
Did he use that one on Blackbird?
Yeah. It's the exact same picking style, just a different tempo and feel.
So, when you play, what is your Les Paul, you say, is still your favorite guitar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you use that mainly when you play with...
I toured with my old Gold Top for a few years with Paul, but at a certain point, I got a little bit scared of it getting damaged.
Right.
I wouldn't be afraid of it being stolen because we got great security, as you can imagine. But, just wear and tear happens on a guitar. But to a great degree, Paul tours with his classic guitars and basses. The Epiphone Casino that he played the Taxman solo on. That's out with us. And the bass that he played on it, all that stuff is really with us. The Texan from Yesterday and from all the early Wing stuff too. But so that gave me sort of license to bring my fine old acoustic and my old electrics out with me. The amps are newer because you want those things that are a little bit more sort of related to electronics and tubes and things like that. You want that to be fresh. But the others I tour with, the Gold Top, no, I've sort of brought that back home to just rest a little bit because I don't want to risk it. It's the one guitar of my collection that I couldn't live without.
Yeah. Also, for the guitar nerds out there, you've got your own line with Gibson now, right?
Yeah, I have a signature model, and they've just come out with another one. So now I have two of them. And
now, are you using those on tour?
Yeah. My first signature model, the black one, it's called Silver Fox is the finish. Kind of a grainy black with white appointments on it. And I use my new one, which is a different pickup configuration, a P90, nerd alert, a P90 rather than two humbuckings. Yeah, that's a fun one.
Did you, I think I seen you play a Gretsch before, hadn't I?
Yeah. I have to mention the Gretsch, which is signed by Dwayne Eddy.
Oh, did you? Yeah. He's such a great guy.
Really great guy.
So, yeah, Brian, thank you so much for coming over on short notice. I really can't thank you enough for doing this.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
Everybody, watch next week on Musicians Hall of Fame Backstage. And again, Brian, thank you so much.